Well, hello there. I've been taking a little bit of a break from making videos for a bit with holiday things and just wrapping up the season. And I thought today would be a nice way to break the ice as it starts to freeze out here in documenting basically a last planting before things really seize up. We're going to move towards much colder weather, I think a low in the single digits in the next few nights. And I think there's still a window to plant out here. And I want to share some ideas about a new orchard planting I'm going to do at our neighbor's field. Here I am in our neighbor's field where we grow lots of potatoes, lots of garlic, or as Sasha would say, the garlic and potatoes grow themselves and we help them. And we have some leftover plants, some wonderful plants that need to find homes. I was talking with our neighbor Darren about this, who lets us farm here. For example, this peach, really nice peach. It actually has some buds on it that looks as though it may flower and fruit next year. There's two of them. And I said, you know, I wonder if we could plant some of these. They can't really stay in this field because he likes to keep this open. And for our purposes, zeroing out the beds so they can move in different directions is pretty helpful from a management standpoint. But I said, hey, what if we actually find a place to plant some of these in your landscape? And I offered up here that along the road, maybe this is getting too windy, I don't know. But along the road here, we've got this hedgerow that's pretty wild and feral, and definitely I don't want to just clear it by any stretch and erase who's in here. There's lots of red osier dogwood, there's graybark dogwood, there's arrowwood viburnum, there's a bunch of wild apple trees in here. What if we augment this space by adding in some trees into the interior of here? I think the peaches could hide in this for the first few years and sneak past deer browse by virtue of the fact that they're inside this feral space that the deer don't really move through. And he was open to the idea as well of saying from this line, basically the edge of where it's been mowed, we can come out about 5 feet. So I have a whole bunch of cuttings of black currants and elderberries that I'd like to stick on the outside in this open successional spot, and then start adding trees into the interior in a thoughtful way to not remove what's here and start from scratch, but to add in and then slowly phase change some of these older characters over to peaches and persimmons and other trees like that. So I did some pruning that needed to happen anyway. There's some black currants. These are a really lovely production variety. I wanted to cut out some of the older wood in our chicken summer runs. These are all extra cuttings. I didn't eradicate or destroy plants. I just took cuttings that needed to happen anyway. And underneath here are elderberries that I needed to cut back for an area where we're going to be expanding our solar production. So both prunes we wanted to do anyway, and we can add them in. The black currant is particularly good at deflecting deer browse, and so that'll be the leading edge, and I'll start with that. This time of year it is definitively moving towards winter and the air is quite cold. It's definitely below freezing above ground, but the soil still has residual warmth. There's some icy crust that's happening on the surface, but down below I feel very confident that it's actually thawed out. And I've talked before about the idea of establishing field cuttings by simply pushing dormant cuttings right into the ground. So for example, this is black currant, and I can just push this right into the earth and it should be able to root. So I'm just going through from this first pile. I don't process them at home. I bring them out in full length to the field and then I can cut them down as they're getting planted. So I'm giving myself field ready sticks like this. Normally what we sell through the website is a lot shorter and it's meant to go into a nursery bed and grow for a season before they move out. But since I have such an abundance of these, I can afford to plant longer sticks. You want to be within reason. I wouldn't want to plant a whole length like that, only 2 or 3 inches in the ground. You want a good ratio of what's below ground and above. And right now I'm just dotting out every 10-15 feet or so. I'm pacing out from the edge 5 feet and sticking one of these black currant cuttings to give myself a dotted line, and I'll certainly infill quite a bit from there. So I'll just paste this out from the line, roughly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's what we agreed on as a reasonable distance. And then I'm just going to push them in. I like to push them in with a bias towards the north. I've talked about this before. And this helps them, so this way is north, and I'm going to push them in so that they'll go in as far as is reasonable. This is an area that the vehicles drive on a lot, so I might actually use a shovel to help me here. I got this little sweetie somebody sent me a ways back, a spear shovel. I talked about making your own before, but basically this should be able to let me dig in just a little, and then I can slip this in behind it. I think that's the move for these. That's about it. I can leave this nice and long because it's going to root over winter. You can step that in, and that's as much fuss as it needs. I can clean up the stem by cutting at a nice steep bias that helps push into the ground a little bit more. And what I'll often do is take a nice long piece, like way bigger than what I want to actually leave in the ground for the long haul, and feed it in as far as it'll let me go, and then trim off some excess to be my next cuttings down the line. And that's it. I'll put a cutting in every 2 or 3 feet down this whole line. So I'll pace out to measure the 5 feet out from the original line every 10 or 12 feet just to give myself a start. I might just go to that pipeline over there. Yeah, believe it or not, there's a gas pipeline buried deep underneath this whole thing, which is kind of crazy, but it is what it is. So I'll fill out some black currants. Incredibly fast planting technique to push cuttings into the ground. Really quick side note, if you're in the area, if you're not too far from the Finger Lakes and you want to do this kind of ASAP, give me a call. I got tons of cuttings right now. I'll put my phone number in the description and we can figure out a nice way to get you set up with this if you want to try it too. Well, you can see I got the black currants down the line here. I'm going to infill with some elderberries now just to get a feel for that rhythm too. These are a lot beefier and I think I'm going to have them go straight up and down just so it looks a little bit more presentable to folks walking by and to the person who owns the land while they get established. If you pitch these to the north, they'll shoot up in an interesting and productive way as well, but it might look aesthetically a little rough. It's the same basic idea of using a shovel, ideally a nice sharpened shovel if you have it, to give yourself a start, or you can even dig a little hole for something this size. But basically I'm going to go in between the black currants and the existing hedgerow here with the elderberry, and that should give me enough room to push an electric push mower on either side of all this to maintain for the first year. I think I'm going to give these about 4 feet between them. Instead of the black currants about 2 feet, these will be about 4, give or take. I've got my planting pattern established. The black currants as the furthest edge for all this, elderberry just in from there, and that just goes right on down the line. So now I can do that for a bit in about 20 minutes of effort so far, using sticks that I had to cut anyway and just a shovel, hand tool kind of scenario, and you can see the pattern really starting to settle in. So elderberry in a nice clean row, 4 feet apart, and black currants offset facing the wildlife on the western side there. And what we can do here is we can allow the elderberry to establish and start growing. Same thing with the black currants. Bunch of different pathways. We can either just let this be and it's elderberry and black currant, great. And we think about every other elderberry, either in between them in row or offset in the middle. Do we plant a persimmon or a peach or somebody else that can become the canopy eventually? And as the elderberry is competitive with the next layer of succession, we cut elderberry hard to feed those plants. So they can become support plants or biomass accumulation plants, short-term cropping plants for now. And we're just laying out the framework of this planting with this for $0 and under an hour of total effort. That's what I wanted to plant as far as the elderberry in this block. Once we get to this open mode area, I don't want to block that or get in the way. So that's the last one in the northern line here. There's about 10 left over, so what I think I'll do is just dot them throughout the hedgerow in here. Just sneak them in random spots and let it be a feral thing. A couple elderberry stuck in this style. It's a little bit more like guerrilla planting in here. They have a chance to really hide within this. And it's very competitive and weedy, so it's a, you know, flip a coin whether or not they can take. You kind of need a moist spring, good scenario. I might help them pop in the spring with a little bit more compost around them. If time allows, we'd bring compost and wood chips to all the ones planted on the inside. I think they'll be okay. If we get particularly super cold real fast with no snow, they might get spit out. But most years, a few thousand cuttings like this, it's worked generally very well. I would expect with an average winter, even with some good cold, once the snow starts coming in, snow is going to drift into this area more because the hedgerows here, which helps insulate and protect. I would put this at around 80 to 90, maybe even 100% chance, 80% chance of working really well. Even if some of the sticks get spit out in the winter, you can push them in the spring. It's wacky how hardy these things are. So now we got these seedling grown peaches. These have been in the field for 2 years. Their preference would be to just stay here. I'd love if that was the case too, but it's not in the cards. So these have to move, and now's a good time. I'll dig them out. I'm not going to prune or shape them at all. I'll just keep them the size that they are, the shape that they are, add them into the hedgerow, wish them well, and I think they'll have a decent chance. I gotta wear gloves for this because the King of Spades, which is my favorite nursery shovel, is cold in the winter when you're barehanded. A little red currant that was rooted, I'm gonna move that to the place where the peach goes once they get planted. When it's below freezing like this, you kind of have to move with a quickness. So I think these roots they're sensitive to direct sunlight. They're definitely sensitive to freezing as well. I'm going to leave most of the roots intact. Maybe I'll trim these just a little if I can't dig a hole big enough. Basically looking to dig a plug roughly that size. I'll trim the excess rather than jam it in. But that's the first peach out with a little friendly red currant to go along with it, because that's the serendipity of it. Spirit of getting on with it, I'm just going to choose a spot, and this is one that's kind of in the middle of this thicket. Great bark dogwood, there's goldenrod. There's a fair bit of scrubble double in here that makes it so the deer don't really move through this space, they move through the mowed spaces. So I'm going to go in a little bit, plant it, and let it be in and amongst. I haven't settled the peach in yet, but you can see why I would want to plant a peach in this context if I didn't want deer to find them. If you got a good eye for peaches, you know where they are, but otherwise it's basically another shrub that's not wholly unlike the red osier dogwood. In fact, the color is really, really similar, and most all dogwoods are very not interesting to deer. They don't seem to browse them much at all, and so it's just yet another dogwood in the midst, and not right on the edge, so the deer won't necessarily push in. They could go in and nibble it, but whatever. This was a tree we grew from seed. It's free, it needed to come out of the soil anyway. It's loaded with flower buds, so if some of it gets chewed or buck rubbed or whatever, it still might actually crop really nicely. I am not planting it very deep because our soil here is quite wet, so I dug in a little, then I'm going to build up around them, basically put them on a berm, in order to have the root zone of this peach be a little bit elevated, not above ground, but just half at the original grade, half slightly above. I needed some extra soil, and I just looked around. Right near, within one shovel's distance, was a little holler here, a bunch of extra leaves, a little bit darker. It was a lull anyway, so it's where water collects. There's extra nutrient there, so I scavenged some of that. That'll be more pooly and watery in the spring and collect even more nutrients to harvest later, and that let me bank around the peach. The red currant goes to the south and west, so that as it grows, it confers shade to the lower parts of the peach to reduce sun scalding pressure, and some rocks at the bottom that were in the hole can go to the south to add a little solar gain. See, I'm thinking about this stuff. It looks like I'm just whacking trees in the ground, but I am. But I'm also thinking a little, and that's the fun of it. You can think as much as you want or as little as you want. I'll get this pushed in and around, stepped in. This would be a nice spot to add a little bit of wood chips or compost or manure, something aromatic. I've got some liquid gold in the car, wink wink, that will be poured around these to add to some fertility and let the deer and rabbits know that there are predators abound. And that's a peach snuck into a hedgerow. There's a second peach, the last one that needs to come out of that bed, up and out and ready to go in, looking so much like that red osier right behind it. I figure let me just plant this a few feet to the south of that red osier. That looks like the thicket vibe that red osier does. Should be able to just disappear right in there. I have a bunch of these black currant cuttings left over. I planted as much as I wanted to in the field, so the rest I was just going to toss, but I realized I can sneak them in a nice ring right around the base of this friend to let rabbits and voles know that it's funky smelling right around here. Especially on the side that faces out to the clearing. The black currant's really aromatic, and when it touches other plants, it seems to kind of confer its funky, musky magic. It smells a little like an animal, and I wonder if that helps deflect other animals. So you can play the game, where's the peach? Exactly, that's the point. Now when it gets really, really cold, the deer probably push in a little bit harder and start sniffing for different things. If they nuzzle up against the black currant, or if the rabbits do, that's what they will smell first, and that'll take over and seems to move them along. But again, it's entirely possible these get girdled, they get chewed, they get ripped out, but I didn't pay $100 for them. These are plants that are grown from seed. And so if you can't find them, this is them right here, the peach, with such a similar color and morphology to the red osier that I think they just blend right on in. But those are just my eyes. I know what I'm looking for, maybe the deer do as well. And so we'll just let that grow for a bit. If I start to see a little bit of browse, tip browse or whatever, I can go in and cut some multiflora rose, some spiky stuff, and lay that on the peach as a little bit of a physical barrier. But now we've got the peach in with an aromatic ring, another peach planted to the north of that wild apple, which we will graft over to something fancy later, and black currants and elderberries on a really nice regular pattern right down this whole line and over to the entrance, holding the option of being an elderberry and blackcurrant orchard maintained to that goal, or the start, the pioneer, weird word, the stewards, the initial stewards of moving this from mowed context up into forest canopies. So maybe it's persimmons in between each, maybe it's plums, who knows. For now it's elderberries, blackcurrants, and a couple peaches that needed to get the heck out of the nursery beds in our production field and into the beginning of this hedgerow orchard. Let me know your thoughts, your comments, your concerns. Thanks for watching. We'll do an update in the summer as this unfolds.